Welcome back to Energy Technology. I'm Eve Thomas, editor of Offshore Technology, and your host for today's episode. This week, we're talking about autonomous robotics in oil and gas operations, considering how technology might take over the sector's 4Ds: dull, distant, dirty, and dangerous tasks. To help us make sense of the topic, we've got technology experts from Equinor and robotics developer ANYbotics, as well as a GlobalData analyst specialising in robotics in oil and gas. GlobalData reports that the global robotics market was valued at $90.2 billion as of 2024. By 2030, it will have grown at a compound annual growth rate of 15% to reach $205.5 billion. It's a lucrative market, and manufacturers and adopters are vying to lead. With us to work out what's happening in the space is GlobalData analyst Sathwika Addela. Welcome, Sathwika.
Thanks, Eve. Good to be here.
You recently authored a report identifying some of the leading manufacturers and adopters of robotics across oil and gas operations. Can you tell us what you found?
Sure. In this report, we looked at robotics from both the manufacturing side and the adoption side in the oil and gas industry. On the manufacturing side, robots are broadly categorized as industrial and service robots based on their usage. The first category is led by companies like ABB, Fanuc, Kawasaki, Kuka, Teradyne's Universal Robots, and Yaskawa. In terms of service or specialized robots, the landscape is broader, with players including ABB again, as well as Alibaba, Amazon, Cyberdyne, DJI, Intuitive Surgical, Samsung Electronics, Teradyne, and Unity Robotics. These companies are producing robots that can do everything from inspection and monitoring to autonomous operations in complex environments. On the adoption side, major oil and gas operators are leading the way. Companies such as ADNOC, BP, Equinor, Repsol, ExxonMobil, Shell, Total Energies, Sinopec, and Saudi Aramco are integrating these robotic solutions to improve operations, safety, and efficiency. One interesting example I highlighted is Equinor, which has been an early adopter of autonomous inspection robots, showing how these technologies can be embedded strategically across offshore and onshore operations. So overall, there is a strong mix of established industrial players manufacturing the robots and leading energy companies pushing the adoption to assist in operations.
And in fact, I've got a senior manager of technology at Equinor here today to talk us through the company's robotics strategy and some of the solutions it implements. I'll let him introduce himself.
My name is Magnus Brandtzæg. I'm heading up a unit in Equinor R&D, which we call asset autonomy.
Magnus, thank you so much for being here. You've already used what will likely be this episode's buzzword, autonomy. Autonomous robotics are embedded with oil and gas technologies including sensors, cameras, AI capabilities and more to enable them to make sense of challenging environments. This makes them particularly useful in hazardous, remote and offshore locations. In fact, it makes them perfect for the 4Ds, which plague oil and gas. So, Magnus, what kind of roles are you hoping robots will take over from humans?
It's tasks that, in theory at least, people and machines can do equally well, but we would prefer the people not doing it. Because of those 4Ds, it can be just boring, or it's a remotely controlled or unmanned facility, so it's distant. We don't want them to go out there. It costs money and it's not that efficient. Or it's dirty or dangerous. You really would prefer not to have the people there at all.
That makes a lot of sense, and certainly, robots that can take over high-risk roles are good news from a health and safety perspective. However, the capabilities of autonomous robotics are rapidly growing, and innovation is constantly driving potential use cases. Sathwika, let's go back to you. Can you tell us how autonomous robotic technologies have evolved and how they offer value to oil and gas operators?
Autonomous robotics in oil and gas have come a long way in recent years. Initially, robots were mostly used in supporting roles like remote inspection or simple monitoring tasks. But now we are seeing a shift towards AI-driven, fully autonomous robots capable of performing complex inspections and maintenance operations independently. These systems combine advanced sensors like vision systems, LiDAR, ultrasonic detectors, and thermal imaging with AI algorithms, enabling capabilities such as real-time monitoring, leak detection, predictive maintenance, and safety assessment in hazardous environments. For operators, this translates into several tangible benefits. Improved safety because personnel are less exposed to dangerous conditions, enhanced asset integrity, reduced downtime, and cost efficiencies over the long time. Early adopters like Equinor are deploying robots such as ANYmal X for offshore inspections and Hydron or subsea drones for extended underwater surveys. Shell is using SensorBot and autonomous underwater vehicles for methane detection and subsea monitoring, while Chevron and Petrobras are using AI-enabled drones and robotic inspection systems across their upstream and offshore assets. So overall, autonomous robotics are moving from experimental gadgets to essential tools, helping companies operate more efficiently, safely, and sustainably.
If dogs are a man's best friend, then robotic dogs are the unmanned best friend. Enter Roberta, a robotic dog which has been trundling around Equinor's Northern Lights facility since November 2024, working autonomously to carry out various missions. By scanning the entire facility with LiDAR to create a 3D model, Equinor had Roberta running missions within days of arrival. Magnus, can we get an update on Roberta? How's it doing at Northern Lights?
It's not yet unmanned because it has been finishing commissioning of the plant itself. We're starting the phase 2 project, so it won't be unmanned actually for some time. But the good thing is also gives us the opportunity to test the robot in an environment with people as well. Because this is one of the sites which is supposed to be normally unmanned. But we have a lot of sites with people where we're also planning to deploy robots. So getting that experience as well, how the robot behaves with the people, how do you plan in your missions the areas where the robot should not walk. For instance, one is it tripped and it fell down into the ditch because it was actually cordoned off, but we hadn't put it into the mission yet. So these are challenges you meet when you're in this situation, but it's really good learnings both for us and people on the ground. And also for ANYbotics, which has supported in this process as well, to actually see it being deployed in the real environment and with those challenges.
As Magnus just mentioned, Equinor has worked with robotics developer ANYbotics. Roberta is one of ANYbotics' animals, and as such includes a host of embedded technologies, from cameras to gas sensing and acoustic imaging payload to LiDAR. And who better to tell us about these than the ANYbotics team themselves, and I've got two of them here today. Mukesh Mukundun is the Senior Director of Sales and Key Accounts, while Joël Schlienger is Department Head of ANYmal X, managing all of the technical details. Welcome both of you.
Thanks, Eve. Thanks for having us here.
Happy to be here and to answer your questions.
Joel, let's come to you first. We've talked a bit with Magnus about ANYmal already, but ANYbotics also has its ANYmal X, which was used during a 5-week trial at Equinor's Castor site, and its ANYmal XD, which is due to be released this year. What technologies are embedded in these products, and why are they useful to oil and gas operators?
Well, on high-level technologies, we have standard quadruped robot with 12 drive actuators to move the robot autonomously through an environment in the gas and oil sector. It has a set of sensors for far field and near field mapping. These are standard equipment that you have with these kind of robots. There is also an inspection head, which is the core of the robot, because the robot is supposed to create data for analysis of the environment. And so in this inspection head, we have all sorts of technology like zoom cameras, thermal camera, we have microphones. In this specific X robot, we also have additional sensors that are then used for a particular sensing purpose in the oil and gas, in particular sensing ethylene or different gases that are normally happening in the air in case of leakages. So we are sensing substances with the help of this robot. So the robot is actually a vessel to carry around our sensors that are doing this job in an autonomous way.
The rate of innovation is impressive, but there is one word which underpins all technical considerations: autonomy. Mukesh, you work closely with Equinor on their robotics deployment. Why does autonomy matter for the oil and gas sector?
Yeah. So, when you think about robotics, right, in general, think of it like any jobs that are dull, dangerous, distant, and dirty should not be done by a human. These jobs should be done by a robot. And when you look at oil and gas, we have a lot of those jobs. So this makes it a classic playground for robots to be deployed. Now, why does autonomy matter? Goes down into two pillars of oil and gas, which is most of these sites are remote. They are very remote in North Sea, middle of the desert, which are difficult for humans to be present. And it's also dangerous. So that is where autonomy kicks in, where you have autonomous systems that can completely navigate those environments without a human assistant, collect data, and send it back to a human operator that can kind of be used for deciding what further actions need to be taken. Now, autonomy is also important because, as I said, some of these sites are so remote, the connectivity might not be that great. So there you need robots that are autonomous and are capable of understanding the environment and navigate that by themselves.
That's great. Thank you both for those thoughts. Before you go, what do you think is next for autonomy in robotics, specifically for oil and gas? What technologies are emerging and how will they reshape the sector?
That's a good question. For oil and gas sector, we are talking about a very specific environment. You have to avoid any ignition risks. That's one of the core topics. So a product that is autonomously moving through this kind of environment, and we are talking about EX zones, like zone 1 and zone 2. The technology that you need is to prevent a robot to create a spark, because that is a no-go. So whatever you do in robotics, you need to create technology that prevents this. So in particular, when you produce a robot, you have to comply with a lot of standards, the EX standard as well. Machine directives is one part. But the important thing is when you design a robot, for instance, for zone 1, where you have to expect natural gas, you need to, let's say, re-engineer your robot, avoiding any risk, create a spark. And in particular, going into this environment with a quadruped robot, which has never been done before, you need to reinvent a lot of features of existing robots that are not used in this environment. And this is basically what we are doing for the last few years, is re-engineering that design space to make it compliant to the standard and to get it approved by the notified bodies that normally release these kind of designs. So it's a very interesting task for engineers, but you don't have too much freedom because you have to comply to certain requirements and to release criteria that you don't have maybe in other sectors.
Think of it like this, right? Robot is just a means to carry payload and compute power near your asset to the point of interest. Now, what you mount on robot classically determine what the robot can do. So today we have an inspection payload that can collect a lot of data. We can add more and more inspection payloads like gas sniffers and different kind of payload that will add the value from the robots. Now, there is another important factor. Few years ago, we had mobile phones, which was used just for making a phone call. Now we pretty much run our life because of the compute power that the mobile phone gives to us. The robot is also having compute power. You are bringing the computing capabilities to the edge of the system, and that will unlock a whole new lot of value streams for our customers in terms of what they can achieve.
Magnus, same question for you then. What do you think lies ahead for autonomous robotics in oil and gas?
You have the capabilities as one dimension, and then you have the autonomy as the other dimension. And then, of course, the end goal would be to have everything autonomous and with a large set of capabilities. But I think going there, we see this can go in two different directions. More and more autonomous, then see how the capabilities evolve eventually, or higher capabilities but less autonomy in the beginning and then trying to increase the autonomy. We're working on both axes there, but there are quite different types of robots.
It sounds like there's an exciting future ahead for robotics in oil and gas. In this episode, we've talked primarily about robotics on land, but there are plenty of subsea operations around pipeline inspection and maintenance too, perhaps to be addressed in a future episode. Sathwika, before we go, can we hear some concluding thoughts on where you think the future demand is?
Definitely. Looking ahead, I think the future demand for robotics in oil and gas will continue to grow strongly, particularly in areas that are risky, remote, or repetitive to perform manually. Subsea operations are a perfect example. Inspection, maintenance, and monitoring of pipelines and underwater assets will increasingly rely on autonomous and semi-autonomous robots. We will also see increased adoption in onshore assets, including in well drilling, pipelines, storage tanks, and refining equipment for predictive maintenance, inspection of critical infrastructure, and operations in hazardous environments. The key trend is that robotics won't just be about replacing human labor, they will be integrated as strategic assets that deliver operational insights, safety, and cost efficiency. Companies that combine AI, advanced sensors, and robotics effectively will have a clear advantage. So the next few years will likely be defined by deeper integration of robotics across the full value chain, both on land and subsea, making these technologies essential for the future of oil and gas operations.
That's it for today's episode of Energy Technology. Find more news and strategic insights into all things energy on power technology, offshore technology, and mining technology, all free to access. For quick daily updates, make sure to subscribe to our newsletters. I've been your host, Eve Thomas, and we will see you next week.